Hi y'all, today I'm going to be doing a requested video which is over how I studied for the CPA exam. So I'm going to go over my background, some tips I have for preparing for the exam, and then some tips I have for taking the exam, scheduling it, that sort of thing. These tips, by the way, are for people who are working individuals. If you don't have a job and this is like what you're doing, or you're in between jobs. I know a lot of people will graduate college and then like in May and then start work in September. So if you're in that summer period where you don't have anything to do, then maybe you might want to study a little bit more, but I'm just giving these tips as someone who worked a good amount of time while trying to pass the exam. Just to give y'all a little bit more info about me, I got a bachelor's degree in accounting and I graduated in December of 2010. I did not get a master's degree and I just took additional classes to get to the required number of hours in Texas, which is 150 hours. And I took certain classes that were at a undergraduate and graduate level, like they were a mixed class. So I took advanced financial accounting, which is related to like consolidations, governmental accounting, cost accounting. I did not take a corporate income tax course though. At my college, I was able to either decide to do either a master's in accounting or just take additional classes to get to that hours threshold. And for me, my goal is to go back to college to get a master's in business administration, so an MBA. And so I didn't want to get a master's in accounting, and also it's more expensive obviously to take graduate classes, so me taking those classes at an undergraduate level to get to that hours threshold was just more economical for myself, especially because I was, putting myself basically through college, student loans, and having a job, that kind of thing. So that was my educational background. And as far as work experience goes, I work for an accounting firm, and so that's where my expertise is in, is I do audits, so external audits, and that's where my work experience is. So just to give you a little bit of info on my CPA exam experience is basically when I passed the CPA exam, I passed within a 3.5 month period. So I did all 4 sections in basically 3.5 months. However, I did take FAR twice and BEC once before that little period of time, and I'll go more into depth about why I didn't pass the first time I took it and what I did to basically get myself to pass the exam. The first tip I have is to stay motivated, and that could be by having a goal in your mind. So obviously you want to pass a CPA exam, but like the reason for that could be, an example is that your work provides a bonus for if you pass it within a certain amount of time. I know a lot of the big 4 accounting firms and some of the mid-tier firms as well offer some kind of bonus if you pass within the first or second year of you working at that company. So that could be some motivation for you. And also, if you don't have that particular bonus structure in your company, I think the best way to stay motivated is to know that having a CPA designation definitely gives you a competitive advantage. So if you're out in the job market and a company is looking at you who would be a CPA compared to someone who has like a master's in accounting, they probably would lean towards someone with a CPA license depending on what role it is that you're obviously interviewing for. But definitely having a CPA designation makes you a lot more desirable in the whole job industry market. I definitely, having a really good goal in your mind and just staying motivated and doing it for yourself, that definitely will aid you in passing the exam. And then another piece of advice that I was given when I had failed my exam taking process and I was kind of down on myself was that someone told me basically to give myself the opportunity to pass, which is so true because the CPA exam is not an exam that you can just go in and wing. It's not one of those exams, not like in college where you're going to get some kind of curve, or it's not an easy exam to take. And So basically the reason why I failed my first attempts at taking the exam was because I wasn't fully prepared. Like I said, I graduated college in December 2010 and I started working in January 2011. So that's right during busy season, and I worked for a Big Four accounting firm at the time. So I was pretty burned out by the time summer came, summer 2011. So I was pretty burned out just because I hadn't had any time to relax and, you know, chill out between college and busy season. I took FAR first, and for some reason I thought it would be a good idea to do the hardest one first, which it wasn't. And the way that I studied for it is I took a week off from work and I just studied the entire week. I tried to listen to all the lectures, which the lectures take up a lot of time. There's several hours, you know, just each chapter is I think like maybe 2 or 3 hours of a lecture in itself. And that's what I tried to do. I tried to listen to the lecture. I didn't even get through all the material both times I took FAR, so obviously I wouldn't pass. I didn't know enough of the information, hadn't gone through it enough to give myself an opportunity to pass. Then I took BEC later that summer, and I really wasn't serious about it, so I thought I could just go in. I thought BEC, which was like the business portion of it, would be super easy, so I thought I could wing it. I didn't even crack open the book, which is a really dumb decision, and I failed. I'm just letting y'all know because I did make mistakes taking the CPA exam, so just so you know, if you have failed a few times or whatever, you know, don't give up on yourself. You can pass it. You are smart enough to pass the exam. So first off the bat, whenever I was really serious about passing the exam, I basically printed out 3 months of a calendar, and I sat down and planned out exactly how I was going to study for the CPA exam. Now for me, I wanted to do little pieces of studying every single day and then do a larger amount of studying on the weekend. I didn't want to just leave everything for the weekend because then you don't get any time to unwind from work. So how I would plan it is look at all of the sections that you have and kind of just split it up. During the weekday, I would say split it up so that you read maybe like 20 or 30 pages of the book and do some homework problems. Just split it up where it's reasonable that you'd be able to do it in a day. I usually would go to work an hour early, or during my lunch break I would just sit and study instead of, you know, going out to lunch. And that's how I studied during the weekday at work. Then on the weekends I actually would have larger periods of studying, so that would be just, you know, a longer amount of time, usually 6 to 8 hours on Saturday and then on Sunday as well. And then while I was also planning it out, depending on where I was at, I would plan in a day of just relaxation, like no studying, just, you know, letting yourself kind of have a day off and, you know, relax. I would suggest definitely scheduling out your exams. So if you do want to take a section, go ahead and pay for it and schedule it for a certain time so that you have a goal to work towards. And obviously when you have money down on it, because each section is almost $200, $150 to $200, I forget exactly, but when you have money on the line, it definitely is very motivational for you to get your money's worth. And I know that a lot of the firms, they'll pay for a section, like they'll pay basically if you passed all 4 sections, they'll pay for those passing sections. So anything outside of that is out of your pocket, and it's not cheap. So it's definitely a motivational piece if you are, you know, investing money into it. So definitely schedule out the exam and then sit down and try to plan out exactly how you're going to study and get through all the material before that exam date. And I will share a brief picture, I guess, of one of my calendars. I think I took a picture of it and put it on Instagram back in the day, and I'll share it so y'all can kind of see how I planned out my exam taking. My next tip is knowing your study habits. So for me, I'm a person who, I don't just sit in a class and retain all the information an instructor would go over in that class. I would need to listen to them and take notes and go over it several times for me to really be able to remember it. I'm not one of those people who will hear it once and just off the bat memorize it. So if you're like that, then you are so lucky. But if you're like me, that just doesn't help me all that well. So for me, I found that the lectures were not very helpful for me. I felt like they weren't providing any further information that I couldn't get from just reading the textbook that comes with Becker, and that's what I used with Becker. You get a hard copy textbook. You also get the software, which has lectures. I think it has some exam questions, and then also it has a soft copy of the textbook, but with little notes, like similar notes to what the instructor is saying on the lectures. So they have mnemonics and just little tidbits that help you remember certain concepts in the material. And so I eliminated listening to the lectures because it literally takes a couple or a few hours to listen to it, especially if you stop the lecture and write notes down. So what I normally would do is first I would go to the notes section in the software and write them all down in my textbook, because writing down things for me helps get it into my brain for some reason. So that's something that I normally always do. So I would write it down into my textbook. Then I would read my textbook and also take notes on the side, like on a separate piece of paper, on things that I, wanted to remember. So I would write those down on a notebook and have it there. So I would go through the entire chapter, then I would go and do the homework problems. And any homework problem that I missed, I would, note it down. Then I would go through the flashcards, and then I would read through the notes that I took again, and then go through the homework problems that I missed. So that's how I would do each and every section. And for me, that was just very helpful, and it would help me retain the information. So the only times I would listen to the actual lecture is when it was a subject that I didn't either take a class for or that I wasn't exposed to at work. So for me in particular, that was for corporate tax. So for that section, if I was having issues, retaining some kind of concept or understanding a concept, then I would go and listen to the lecture. And so with that in mind, I feel like I was able to maximize my study time, because obviously if you're a working professional, you don't have all that much study time. Obviously you're working like 8 hours a day and traffic, that kind of stuff. So I felt like that's what maximized my study time during the day and on the weekends. And then my last tip is to definitely make sure, obviously you want to make sure you get through all the material. You want to make sure you do the simulations related to each section that you're taking. So that is so important, because simulations are a huge amount of your exam as well. And so you want to make sure that you've actually done some, just to make yourself more comfortable with it. So as far as scheduling the exam and planning out how you should take the exam, I would suggest being comfortable taking the exam on one of the sections that you feel most comfortable with. So for me, I felt most comfortable with audit, and because that's the field that I work in, so I actually did audit first at the end of May. I gave myself a week to study for it, and that way I would say if that was my very first time taking the exam, that would be the best one, because you want to be familiar with how the exam is, because there's multiple choice questions like in 3 different sections, and then you do a simulation round, and all of it's timed. So you only have a certain amount of time to get it done, and so you don't want to do that on one of the harder sections. So once I passed audit and I was like, wow, I can actually pass an exam, I went ahead and scheduled out the most difficult exam. So for me, that was regulation, because like I said, I hadn't done corporate tax before in school, and I had done individual tax, but that's not what I work with all the time. So that was the one that I gave myself the most time to study for. I think I gave myself all of June to study for it, because June's like a month where there's no exams being provided. And so I gave myself all of June to do the hardest one. Then I did FAR next, which is the second hardest one. I had taken it a couple times before, but those times did not really help me in taking the exam, because I didn't retain any of the information anyways, like, let's be honest. So the second hardest, and then the last one I saved the easiest of them, which is BEC. And I literally thought I had failed that exam because I was just so brain dead, but I passed, so that was awesome. Just to summarize that, definitely first take the section that you are most comfortable with, so maybe what you work in more often. So I would suggest that, and then I would suggest doing the most hard exam then the second hardest exam, and then the easiest one. I guess easiest one that's left in that mix. So if you aren't in audit or tax, and you don't, and obviously FAR is really hard because you have both GAAP and IFRS in there, I would suggest doing the EC first and then doing audit last, because audit is much easier than FAR and Reg in my opinion. Alright, so when it comes to actually taking the exam, I would suggest stopping to, stop your studying the night before your exam, and that way you allow things to marinate, and so you're not just retaining information that you see right at the end. So I would definitely say give yourself a cutoff time from studying so everything marinates in your brain. And then last but not least, when you go into the exam, they only give you a piece of paper, a pencil, and your identification you bring with you. So you don't bring anything else with you. What I would do sometimes, especially for regulation or for FAR, the ones that had calculations or a whole bunch of mnemonics that would help me out, I would literally sit at the table for a couple of minutes and just do a brain dump. And so that basically means that I would just sit there for just a couple minutes. You don't want to waste too much time. Write down all the mnemonics you can remember, all the calculation you can remember, because obviously it's just from your brain onto the piece of paper, so that's not against the rules. And so that's what I would do. I would just write that all down so that you don't worry about, oh, did I forget that, or that kind of thing. So do a brain dump. Just don't take a lot of time with it because it is a timed exam. Those are my tips on studying for the exam, or really studying for any professional exam, because I know the request was for someone who was doing a professional type exam. Those are my tips, and I just want to let y'all know that you are capable of passing the CPA exam. Just give yourself a chance to pass it and really plan it out, because if you don't plan, you're planning to fail, or something like that. That little whatever quote thing. So yeah, I just want to say, from someone like me who I'm not just off the bat smart, I think I'm a good studier. And not only that, I feel like if you put your mind to something and you really focus on it, you can achieve whatever goals you lay out for yourself. So just definitely keep that in your mind and stay positive, and I know that y'all will do great on your CPA exam. So anyways, if there's any other advice I can give y'all, if you have any more questions, please leave a comment below, and I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and I hope it was helpful. So good luck, and I'll talk to y'all in my next one.